Hey guys, it's Liv here, and in last week's video, I had asked you guys if you had 25 BST to give to any Pokemon, regardless of the stat or combination of stats, what would you guys choose as the most deserving Pokemon? And in today's video, I want to discuss what you guys wanted to see get stat buffs. So if you guys enjoy this type of content and you want to see more like it, leave a like in the video and subscribe for more. And if you guys want to answer next week's question, we do have a couple more days where we're taking answers. My trip got delayed a bit, so answer the link down below or in the comments either way for just what Pokemon you think would be the best Pokemon in OU if the S and S minus Pokemon got banned. For Gallery decks, this would be Pokemon such as Landorus, Weavile, Heatran, Melmetal, and Dragapult. And for national decks, it would be for Landorus, Weavile, Heatran, and Megalopony. So I would love to see your guys' answers to that, as well as just anything else you want to comment. And if you enjoy, again, subscribe, click the links down below. And with that said, let's see what you guys wanted to get stat buffs. So first up, I do want to give my example option because I thought that it was a pretty cool one, but we have Talonflame. Now for Talonflame, I suggested giving us a 25 attack buff. Talonflame's a Pokemon that has already gotten significantly nerfed thanks to Gale Wings being nerfed, and while Heavy Duty Boots being an item in the format does help it a lot, it does still face a lot of other competition as far as offensive Pokemon go, just because of how much power creep has finally caught up to it. So I thought that giving Talonflame 25 more attack would be pretty useful. It no longer would be as broken as giving it a 106 attack stat like it would have been if we were to consider when Brave Bird was always a priority option on Gale Wings. This now has an actual limit to it. There's no just spamming a choice banded Brave Bird Talonflame and just massacring your opponent and killing 3 Pokemon because you're going to do so much damage. You actually do have to be a little bit logical in this, so I do think giving it more attack to at least compensate for the Gale Wings nerf would be pretty beneficial. This still is a pretty cool offensive typing. It could still do some kind of good low tier bulky work with stuff like Willow sets, and I just think the 106 attack would be useful. If you weren't going to give this a 106 attack stat though, which would be the 25 buff for attack, I think just buffing its Fizz Def could be pretty useful, or the Spadef as well. Actually, probably Spadef would be more useful since you do have options like Bulk Up and Willows to help with the physical end of attacks. The point being is that I do think that Talonflame would definitely still be an option for a Pokemon that should get an attack buff, in my personal opinion. Next up though, we do have a few different Pokemon that are also going to get single stat buffs before we get into our dual ones. This would start off with Pokemon such as Crawdaunt, which comes courtesy of Mop of Justice on Twitter, who suggested giving Crawdaunt 25 more speed. They had mentioned this would give Crawdaunt a better option to abuse Dragon Dance with, and I couldn't agree more. If we look at other Pokemon, specifically one other Pokemon that takes advantage of Dragon Dance being Dragonite, that's a Pokemon that has 80 base speed as well, and it's able to outpace a lot of different options. I think that Dragon Dance on Crawdaunt, while it wouldn't be as bulky of a Pokemon and have as free of a type setting up in front of other Pokemon, Crawdaunt could benefit from forcing a lot of different switches. Being able to, of course, threaten with the choice banded variants of a base 80 speed Pokemon would be terrifying. And with Crawdaunt's adaptability also being amazing for breaking, having the base 25 extra speed I think would help pose a lot more threats to a lot of bulkier Pokemon that maybe don't run speed, that hit around that 60-70 mark for speed. So I think that Crawdaunt personally could actually take advantage of this really easily, and with the Dragon Dance set, it could force a lot of options to now consider, am I going to sack to a choice band set, or am I going to let my opponent set up a Dragon Dance in front of me? And you don't always know is the thing, and the counterplay is typically very different. So I think that Crawdaunt could benefit a lot from this in my personal opinion. 25 speed would be amazing for it, helping it outpace a lot of currently OU Pokemon such as Zeraora and Dragapult, so I do think this would be pretty valuable in my opinion. Next up though, we do have Kingdra, which comes courtesy of Zeke0 on Twitter, who suggests giving Kingdra a 25 base buff to speed. Now, I'll be honest, at first I was thinking this would be pretty obnoxiously broken. However, I think I've come down on it a lot after thinking it through. Kingdra would still have a bit of competition as far as Rain Dance bonds go. It would not be faster or naturally more physically offensive than something like a Barraskewda. However, the trade-off would be this is a special Swift Swim mon, and that would be pretty desirable. On top of it as well, Hurricane is a lot better of a coverage for grass types that this has over, let's say, a Poison Jab or Ice Fang on Barraskewda. So there's some give and take there. I think it would still be OU, but I think it would depend on what ends up being in the Paldea decks. I do believe we have confirmation on Toxapex, which would still be a fairly decent switch in, and I think that Ferrothorn's also confirmed if I remember correctly. So I can't really see Rain being some terrifying option, at least to where Kingdra would have to be banned. But it would be a lot more reliant on defensive counterplay at that point, because 110 speed, even without Rain, would still be tying a lot of common OU Pokemon. They will probably be OU at least as far as the early meta goes before Home comes in, or before DLCs come in. Stuff like Gengar, for example, which is already confirmed, I believe. you would be able to speed tie it outright, which would be pretty incredible. One benefit that Kingdra does have over something like a Barraskewda, though, I know I've been comparing it to that a lot, but it's the fastest actual Weather Sweeper that currently exists, would be the fact that Kingdra has really good options for both physical and special attack. So I could really see both of them honestly working pretty well for Kingdra. I do think its spec should be slightly better though because of moves as I mentioned such as Hurricane. However, you could always go with Dual Water as this set does, or personally I would probably, if I was to run it, maybe consider taking out Hydro Pump for Hurricane depending on the composition of my team. Though at the same time, you could always pair this with something like a Zapdos or a Torn and not have to worry about that. The speed on this set, by the way, would be creeping Excadrill, which is currently the fastest speed creepable Weather Sweeper that is actually viable. So I figured that would be useful, though you could obviously take out the 68 in HP and creep a bit further. You could just go max speed to help with other Kingdra. It doesn't really matter, the sky's the limit. Next up though, we do have Reggie Lucky. This comes courtesy of CP Marcus, and he had mentioned giving this a 25 buff to speed. I try to give this the most serious set possible after seeing that, so here you go, Marcus. 25 base faster Reggie Lucky. How does it feel? We have Gothitelle up next, our first defensively buffed Pokemon, courtesy of the real GK Pure, who suggested giving this to either HP or Fizz-Def, and I think that Fizz-Def would be a bit more valuable. Now, I do need to go into a bit of Uber's knowledge for anyone who does not know why this particular EV set is on your screen, because it's a little bit of just all over the place. Basically, this takes two different Gothitelle sets and combines them both and makes them a bit better. This takes your fast Gothitelle set that is meant to create Pokemon such as Groudon and Ho without any speed, and it also takes your more physical defensive set that typically runs 156 Fizz-Def Bolt. This gets the benefits of both because your 25 Fizz-Def buff with a 60 in physical defense without a boosting nature hits 291, which is the exact amount of Fizz-Def you would hit with 156 Bold on Gothitelle, with just the normal investment. So already Gothitelle is already sitting real pretty with that 120 physical defense, I believe. Yeah, it should be 120. So right now we do have, of course, 244 HP, which is just the standard leftover at that point that Gothitelle typically runs in these faster variations, as well as you have just a whole nature that you haven't actually taken advantage of. Now, Gothitelle doesn't actually need to run Bold in this sort of set. You could probably find a case to do so, but to hit the Fizz-Def that Goth would have hit even on its most physically defensive set, you're already only needing the 60 that you happen to have left over anyway. So I figured that you'd probably just want to run this in Calm. Now, again, this could be changed based on what's viable or not. You could maybe even just make this timid and creep a little bit faster Pokemon even, but I figured that at the very least, with a Calm nature, this helps Goth take on some more specially offensive Pokemon a bit better. For example, maybe a Eternatus. I know it's typically a Pokemon that Goth would try and handle on more Spidef sets. I don't know how much Spidef you would actually need for that, but the Calm at least gets you better off than you were before. The point being is that while this could maybe be more optimized, it would really depend on what's actually viable, what's present in the meta at all, but Goth wouldn't really change. As far as low tier presence go, I don't think this actually fixes its not Shadow Tag viability, because truthfully that just needs an outright better moveset, such as maybe Raw Recover for example, to really have some actual benefits there. So we're going to give Gothitelle a big thumbs up, probably the most broken option we're going to see today. Next up though, we do have our final single stat buff Pokemon being Arcanine. So for Arcanine, I actually think that this Fizz-Def buff that was suggested courtesy of one of our YouTube comments, being from Ceres, is a #0001, who suggested giving Arcanine a 25 Fizz-Def boost to Arcanine. This would help a lot more with defensive variations, which we've seen a lot more pop up over the generations than singles, since I believe Generation 6 was the first time we saw it possible, or more so common. And I couldn't agree more. However, my personal investment actually was for VGC. I figured this could give an actual competition to Incineroar as a general check to stuff like Zacian in the current Season 12 and 13 metagames. With the 252 HP and the 60 Fizz-Def, this would be enough to be 3-hit KO'd by any sort of Zacian set that you'd find. With 196 Modest, this would just make Flamethrower and Snarl do more damage. However, you could probably find a way to make this creep faster Pokemon, throw into Spidef for Calyrex a bit better. The sky's the limit there, really, but I just went simple because initially my thought was to give this 196 Adamant and make Flare Blitz guarantee KO non-bulky Zacian that was trying to tie other Zacian. But I realized that you'd be trying to kill off Arcanine faster that way, and you're susceptible to stuff like Intimidate, which is ever present in the meta, so I didn't really think that was a better option here. The point being is, while I'm sure there's an optimal use of the 196 plus nature options that you have for the CV spread, the 252 HP and the 60 Fizz-Def is all you need for defensive hits for the most broken physical attacker in the tier, so why bother with the rest of the stats? Next up though, we do start to get into our more complex options. This current set actually, or more so the stat buff specifically, come courtesy of I am Sam Hater on Twitter, who suggested giving Sharpedo 15 more speed and 10 more special attack. I think this would be honestly incredible for Sharpedo. I think it's one of the coolest buffs we have today, to say the least. This would give Sharpedo a lot more viable mixed options, as well as giving Sharpedo a speed tier that ties a lot of common OU Pokemon without even needing to run a Protect on it. While you would still benefit a lot from this, you'd be able to speed type Pokemon such as Gengar, which will probably be OU come the beginning of the next generation. And on top of this as well, you would be able to actually benefit significantly from this sort of set, because all you would need to actually do to make Sharpedo hit just as hard with this sort of variation is make its special attack go from 252 to 172. This means you get 84 in physical attack, or you could just make damage rolls even more favorably specially. Either one is honestly pretty useful in my opinion at this point, but one other benefit that you do actually get from this sort of stat buff on Sharpedo is the fact you're able to outpace a lot of Scarfers more easily. Currently, Sharpedo's speed tier at 95 isn't great for Scarfish unless you're at +2. However, with 110, you're able to outpace a lot of stuff like Scarflotties when they come back in the metagame eventually, stuff like Gengar, which will probably be a great Scarfer come Scarlet and Violet. So you have a lot of options as far as Sharpedo viability there, in my opinion, and I could actually see this becoming an OU Pokemon, with the caveat being you would probably need to find some really good way around Gothitelle, but otherwise, you'd probably be fine. Next up though, we do get into our next Pokemon. This is our second option from Zeke0, who suggested giving Slurpuff 13 speed and 12 attack. For anyone who might feel like these are a bit random numbers, the speed is specifically to make Slurpuff hit 85, tying out Pokemon such as Kingdra, and the 12 attack is just left over. However, while I do think this would be incredible for Slurpuff, making it outpace a lot of Pokemon it currently doesn't with the +2, for example, you'd be able to outpace stuff like Venusaur in the weather, so I do think this would ultimately be a net positive for it. But if I have a suggestion, Zeke, I would actually suggest having made the attack 8 and the speed 17, because you actually just barely miss out on the speed creep for Excadrill with this, and being able to just go for Belly Drum before Excadrill can get in and then Drain Punch it would be incredible, considering it's the only viable speed creepable weather option that you have that you don't outpace. With 25 buff, you could not possibly make speed work for Barraskewda, and even still, it would take an astronomical buff to make that possible. You would basically need to nearly double the speed already, which you already have really high, just to outpace Barraskewda in the rain. So I don't think it's really practical for any logical buff you can give a Pokemon without going overboard. However, you did just barely miss out on Excadrill's creep, and I think if you're going to go with Kingdra's tie anyway, you may as well just go for the creep on Excadrill. Otherwise though, I couldn't agree with more of buffing the attack and speed on Slurpuff. Special attack could have also been a fair argument for Calm Mind variations to be a bit more viable, but I like the physical one personally because Belly Drum's just more of a nuke button. Next up though, we do have Chimecho. This was courtesy of Wigglytuff on YouTube, who suggested giving it 10 HP more and 5 in physical defense, special attack, and special defense. I don't know if this will make Chimecho really broken or anything, but I can't see where Chimecho doesn't deserve this in all honesty. It's gotten screwed over by power creep time and time again, and it has a lot of really cool move pool options for utility, stuff like Wish, Knockoff, Heal Bell, Defog, Disable, Dual Screens, Healing Wish, Trick Room. You have so many utility options with this Pokemon, and I would actually love to see this get a little bit of stat buff, and I think this is one that realistically just should happen. I don't even think it's a case of a Pokemon that's like really over the top being cool, or a Pokemon becoming OU. I just think it's a Pokemon becoming finally useful in a lower setting again, even just as a really niche option. So I would love for this to actually be the case for Chimecho. This was my personal set, but there's usually a lot of other ones you could do, even more offensive sets. I know I was listing a lot of utility, but Calm Mind would be more viable, at least because you have more in all of your bulk stats plus special attack. All of these sets would just get better. There's nothing really that would get worse from this or outclassed by this, because it's just a general buff for Chimecho. So I think even as well with the logic with this, giving it 480 BST total, this was actually compared to Frostlass, which is another Pokemon that's typically thought of as a Gen 4 Pokemon, because I believe the Chingling was the Gen 4 one, Chimecho was Gen 3. But comparing it to Frostlass, because both have a Gen 3 precedent for one of their forms and Gen 4 for the other, was a pretty good comparison, but it's a bit of a weird one because with Chimecho's case, it's Chingling as Gen 4, whereas Frostlass is the Evo of Snorunt as Gen 4. The point being is I thought it was a cool analogy to make actually, and it's kind of a subtle one, I think the comment made, but I did like the comparison because 480 BST really isn't going to be broken on anything unless you have some astronomically OP ability. Chimecho, truthfully, I think that would need a bit of an ability buff to make it actually an OU Pokemon, maybe like a Psychic Surge with that stat buff, but it's a Pokemon I think that would be at least in the right direction being buffed in my opinion. Finally, though, we do have one more Pokemon, being Electivire. This was suggested, of course, by one of our comments, I believe this was Dylan McCormack, who suggested giving Electivire 10 more speed and 5 more in each of its defenses and HP. Now, personally, I do like this a lot. The 105 speed is an incredible start for Electivire. However, if I had to make a suggestion, while I think the bulk would obviously help, I mean, Electivire is not a bulky Pokemon, but it's not frail either, I would suggest giving this all for the 15 extra to special attack. 105 speed, as well as getting the special attack buff that would bring it to 110, and also in tandem with that, having its 123 attack. This could actually be a pretty cool Scarf option as far as a mixed thing goes. The 105 speed already takes a lot less dependence on a Scarf though, as well, to be fair, being able to outpace a lot of base 100s, which are common in every tier you play, no matter what format you play. Base 100s will exist. It's just that common of a speed tier. So making sure you outpace those is pretty awesome for Electivire, to be honest. And on top of it as well, with the 110 special attack, you would have a lot more viability coming from these special moveset options, or these mixed moveset options that are already popping up as far as OU sets, or not OU sets go, but as far as low tier sets go in Smogon. I couldn't really see a world where Electivire wouldn't appreciate a 110 special attack, and its attack is already pretty good, and again, it's even before the bulk buffs for 80 HP, 72 Phys Def, and 90 special defense would be what he would end up after the 5 in each. I don't think that it even needs those, because for an offensive Pokemon, it's already at least not frail, it's just not bulky either. And I think the special attack would usually be more terrifying. However, again, I don't think this would be a bad buff for it. I think it's a very practical buff, actually. I think the special attack would truthfully tread into more unrealistic territory, even though I do think it deserves it. And Electivire still would not be an OU Pokemon with that in mind, in my personal opinion. It would just be a lot more usable. But regardless, though, let me know what you guys think down below. And if you enjoy this type of content, leave a like and subscribe for more. If you want to answer the question again for next week's video, I am taking answers until the end of Friday for that one. We've already gotten a few great ones, but comment down below or click on the link in the description for the Twitter post for what Pokemon you think would be the best Pokemon on OU if all the S and S- Pokemon were banned. With that said, shoutouts of course to our channel members being Zeke0, Josh K Ultra Player, and Mia. Your guys' support on the channel is immensely appreciated, and thank you guys so much for going the extra mile. And with that said, I will see you guys in next week's video. Until then, peace out, guys.